All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to I Am a Black Woman, Yes, I Matter, Parenting Black and Brown Children. I really appreciate you all being here. But most importantly, I'm here to spotlight James Oliver Jr., who is the creator of Parentpreneur Foundation. So, James, let's kick it off. Why do we have the Parentpreneur Foundation?
Well, because, well, first of all, the Parentpreneur Foundation the purpose of it is to empower Black parents who are entrepreneurs to be the best possible parent and entrepreneur they can be. Because if everybody knows that for brown entrepreneurs, Black and brown entrepreneurs, it's very difficult to get access to capital, get access to resources. But if you're a parent, we were just talking, I have 7-year-old boy-girl twins. I started my business, which was a tech startup, right when my children were born 2 days. They were born 2 days before I started a tech accelerator, but they were 3 months early, and they only weighed 2 pounds apiece. So, and I had a 2-hour drive each way back and forth to the accelerator, so I'm in and out of the NICU, the pressure of getting a minimum viable product built, raising cash, running out of cash, trying to be a great parent. It's a ton of pressure that people don't understand if you're an entrepreneur and a parent. And then, so why is it for Black parentpreneurs, not for everybody? Because George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery.
Okay, so here we are. Yay, great. I'm so happy I see James on here, who is the founder of Parentpreneur, who's here in the comments. So you made it. Thanks so much, James. And we thank you so much for your sponsorship. If you guys are not already part of the Parentpreneur group, it is a free community with awesome resources. Please go to parentpreneurfoundation.org and support all of our Black parentpreneurs out there. So we're gonna just sort of shoot the breeze for like 5 minutes because I misscheduled the live and it starts technically at 12:10, but here we all are. And I just thought let's just chit chat for a little bit. If you have been on before, you know a little bit about why I do this work, why I'm a Black woman. Yes, I Matter is now a virtual series, but I'll just go back into the history of it. As you know, as most of you know, I think, if you've ever had any sort of communication with me, I always end my communications with the word peace. Peace is my motto, and it stands for positive education always causes elevation. And that's so true. I try in my daily life always to figure out ways that we can educate, empower, and elevate. This is the purpose of this conversation, is to educate, empower, and elevate all of us. And I think sometimes people think did Kumara just come up with this in 2020? No, Kumara has been about Black sisterhood and sisterhood generally my entire life. I feel like I came out the womb where can I meet little friends? And what's so special about today's event for me especially is that these are lifelong friends of mine. One is my sister, so I've known her entire life. But my friends, I have known them for 20 plus years. So when you think about that, that's amazing to be able to have these awesome friendships. I'm totally gonna just kind of put them on the spot since we have 4 minutes. Let's talk about one of your favorite memories of me, or we can talk about how we met. I see people chuckling, so you must have a lot of memories over here. Who likes to go first?
I'm going to jump in on this one for sure, because one of our favorite stories, can you guys see me? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
One of our favorite stories is how we actually met. So long story, and we have lots of stories, but I'll just stick with this one because it's kind of PG, so we can work with it. But Kumara and I met because our parents worked together, and I had just moved from Nigeria, and our parents sort of said, oh, our daughters are the same age, they should meet, they should be best friends. And I think we both were I was like, oh, this girl has no friends, she's looking for somebody who just came in and is trying to be my friend. And Kumara was like, this little African girl, I don't know her, I don't want to be her friend. But our parents made us, sort of meet, and we went to go watch Julia Roberts, who Kumara loves. And it was Something to Talk About, I think, was the movie that we watched. And I remember we went in, we sat down, we watched the movie, and literally just started talking, and we have been best friends since for 25 years plus since then. So that's how we met all those years ago.
That is so true. We have to give props to our parents for setting us up on a blind friend date. And here we are 25 plus years later. So it's awesome. All right, next memory.
I can go. So what's interesting is I have so many that are completely inappropriate to share on this channel, so I won't. I'll actually share one that's somewhat relevant to this topic. When I was in high school, there was a racial incident that had happened at high school, and I had stood up in support of a teacher who was spoken ill against. She was a Black teacher, and somebody had spoken very poorly against her. And I spoke up in a very public forum, which was supposed to be a Quaker meeting, and you weren't supposed to judge what anybody said in these meetings. But I got very much reprimanded by the school and sidelined in many ways, and I was called into the office and told that I had psychological issues from things that had happened in my childhood. And there was all these things that came out of it. And it was, a very challenging time to be in high school. And I will never forget, to no direction of mine, Kumara stood up in front of the entire school and read a piece that she had written about what it takes to be a friend and to stand up and to use your voice. And I'll never forget that, because it was putting herself on the line. She was a senior. She was graduating that year. And the school would have kicked her out if they were upset enough. And it was, I've never felt so much support and love from a friend who had everything to lose in that moment and stood up for everything that meant a lot to me.
Adila, that's actually one of my favorite memories about our friendship as well. So that's so good to know that it still means something to you. I really appreciate that. Okay, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. This is Sharita. I'm Kumar's sister, and honestly, I feel like there's so many memories. We grew up together. But I just remember her being like such a great big sister, and I know little sisters can be really annoying, but when we wanted to play dolls or whatever, Kumar was just always there and always so caring. And actually, she's still that person today. And she's the godmother to my children because of that. She's such a unique, strong individual, so caring, that I literally couldn't think of anyone else that I would want to care for my children if something happened. So I just feel so grateful that she is my sister and in my life, and just amazing individual. So.
Oh, thank you, sister love, real sister love, biological sister love. I love that. It's so funny because I never think I'm a good older sister at all. So that was so gratifying to hear. Thank you, Sharita. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yasmin or Lucia, whoever wants to go next.
I'll jump in. Oh, sorry. No.
Go ahead.
So Kumar and I have known each other since freshman year in college. And it's funny because when we first got to meet each other, we were friends through a larger friend group. And, I wasn't really sure how I felt about Kumar. I was like, I don't know. She's always just hiding out in her room. I don't know about that girl. She's kind of to herself. And then as I got to know the larger friend group a little bit more, I was hiding out in Kumar's room too a lot. So we ended up, I think, being some of the tightest, if not the most close friends from that group, because of so many of the reasons that everybody else has said. She's just a loyal, caring friend, and she's a real person. And there's nothing superficial about her. And, that's the kind of people that I need and want to keep in my life. I'm appreciative of her.
Yeah, so there is definitely nothing superficial about you. You keep it real, 110%. Lucia.
Well, I actually have known Kumar the least amount of years on this call, but we actually met through a mutual friend. And the scene in my mind that sticks out with Kumara is when we both showed up early to sort of a networking happy hour, and she's like, "Sis, what's going on with your life? How's the job going? Blah blah." And I'm dealing with all these, crazy, mediocre white women at my job doing all kinds of crazy mess, and she literally went into sister mode and coach mode of saying, well, this is what you need, this, and just literally just started pouring into me at a time of my life when I had no idea how to navigate any of that. So that is who Kumara is to and for me. And that's just who you are.
Oh man, thank you guys so much. And Alushla is my accountability buddy. She is always checking in to make sure that I'm doing self-care, which I'm not doing very well, but at least she holds me accountable for thinking about it. But this is a great way for us to segue, which is the pouring in part. So you guys are all here with us so that we can pour into you all around what it takes to raise Black and Brown children, especially now. 2020 has been such a time. I mean, I don't even know what else to say about it between the pandemic and the racial injustices that we've always known have existed, but have bubbled up to such a violent and politicized surface. And so how are we going to keep our Black and Brown children really safe during this time? What can we do to help our white allies raise anti-racist children? Because I wish I could say it's our generation, but it's going to be the next generation that makes this place a better America, that makes this a better country. And so what can we do to pour into them so that they are the best generation that they can be? So I just, again, want to thank all of my love and my friends. Like this is literally all my, like not all my friends, but these are my friends doing this for me on a Saturday to talk to me about something that's really personal. It is personal to talk and vulnerable to talk about what's going on with you as a parent, how you're feeling about the situations with your children, how unsafe you feel, but you want to protect them, and like, where's that balance? And so the idea that you are willing to come up and show up and be vulnerable and pour into all of the people who are watching us right now on YouTube, I just am in gratitude. I really thank you guys so much. So I'm really going to hop into it. I'm going to ask them all to sort of introduce themselves, shout out their children if they would like. And I'm just going to go around who I see first. So let's go with Adila.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Adila Hussein Johnson. I am a mother to 3. So my eldest, Noah, my first son, he's 5. My daughter, who's my middle child, she's 3.5. And then my youngest, Kyrie, is 2. So I have 3 under 5. My husband and I both work full time. I run a brand called Base. I'm the president of a brand called Base, and it's a travel goods brand in the consumer goods space. My husband is he works in healthcare in business development. So pre-COVID, he traveled a lot. So post-COVID, we've kind of both been home, and my son just started kindergarten. So it's been a very interesting time in our life here at the house. I mean, for me, this panel was really inspiring to join because I've always felt, I was born in Pakistan, grew up for the first 11 years of my life in the Middle East, and moved to the United States when I was 10, actually. And then those first 4 years in this country were incredibly challenging years for me because it was the first time I was actually ever made aware of my race. I didn't know I was a color or a religion. And it was the first time I was exposed to that because I was actually called an Oreo at somebody from school, and I didn't actually even know what that meant. And my father had to explain it to me. And it was a huge learning curve for me. And then since then, having grown up in a culture that was predominantly not me in one way or another, my husband is Black, my kids are mixed, biracial, bi-religious, by ethnicity. So there are a lot of bi. And I'm actually selfishly on this panel to learn more than I am to speak because I am navigating this space probably as newly as everybody else is. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Adila. Alushla.
Hi, I'm Alushla Tribble. I have one son who is 3. I'll use his initials. I use his initials in public, IJHT. And I am a racial equity and cultural educator and coach, where I help institutions to really decolonize their imagination from white supremacy, to find solutions that are non-oppressive. That's what I do all day, and it's a new business, so hit me up if y'all need anything. So, I'm a mommy to 1. I'm an aunt and a daughter and a godmom. And this subject is super important to me. I was a teacher in a past life, and and I guess to follow suit with Adila, the first time I remember being racialized was my first day of kindergarten. And so it is important to really, and this was in Ossining, New York, in Westchester County, New York. So it's important to prepare your children, to give them pride, and to prepare your children for what they will be facing, because, a 5-year-old might not have the words to express, well, mommy, this racist incident happened. But you just have to notice things. Mommy, nobody would sit next to me on the bus, and I was the only brown child on the bus. Right. So, so this is, something very near and dear to me, as my child has entered our public school system here in Nashville as a special needs child and has interacted with public school system sooner than I would have liked. And so I'm also here to say what's worked so far, but I'm also very new in the game. And so I'm here to listen as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alushala, for that. Yasmin.
Hi, I'm Yasmin Fillmore. I work in philanthropy and, like 10 years of experience in the nonprofit space. I have a just turned 5-year-old little girl, Celine, and I've been married for maybe like 10 years to my husband. He is Persian, but was raised in Sweden, so kind of an interesting childhood there. So my child is biracial, but I think, at least in this country, for now, while she will obviously learn about her Persian heritage, probably presents as Black. And it's really important for me to teach her about her culture, but also teach her about the challenges she's going to face at such a young age. Following Adila and Lusa's experience as well, I think we all have been racialized at a pretty young age. And I just want her to be prepared for that and to know that that's not a reflection of her worth, that's other people's problems. And to not let that slow her down in any way, and, to continue to hold herself in high regard. And I think that's going to be a challenge every day. And that's kind of my job as a mom. So I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. I think it's really important to prepare our kids. And like you said, Kumar, now more than ever in this really strange space and time, as we're talking about the challenges of both the pandemic and then what's going on around us from a social and political perspective.
Great, thank you. Shope.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shope Ogunyemi Shenma. I have 2 boys. My husband is Rwandan, so my boys are Black, dark-skinned, Black boys. They are 3 years old, just turned 3 in August, and 9 months old. So I have a 9-month-old as well. And I currently work full-time. My husband is not working currently due to the pandemic, but he's an accountant. And I've worked for many years in entertainment, doing marketing. So worked at a multitude of places across the entertainment industry. And especially in this moment, working from home, trying to balance sort of normalized gender roles, I think for most of us on this panel, working full time, and mommy probably bearing most of the brunt, even with dad helping out of the childcare and the planning and all that kind of stuff. Working, dealing with all of the things that are happening, in our culture and our society right now at work, and also figuring out how to, talk to your children about it. I think that is something that is really on my mind, and it's been, I'm excited to have this conversation because there's just been so many challenges that I've been facing, and it's the joy of my life to be a parent to my sons. It's also one of the scariest things I've ever embarked on, and I'm, just trying to get through it day to day. So excited to talk to you ladies.
Thanks, Sope. I love that vulnerability that you just brought up a little bit. And Sharita.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say I saw a lot of head nods when we were talking about like vulnerability, and this is all new, and we're all navigating like new situations and what that means as a parent, especially to a Black and brown child. So I'm Sharita. I am a wife, a mother, a doula, childbirth educator, many, many roles, educator, period. And I'm excited because I just launched Parent Epiphany. It's an innovative learning and support platform for parents, pregnancy, postpartum, parenthood. I got y'all covered because this is such a vulnerable time. Early parenthood is hard. Okay. Like it's hard. It doesn't matter if you're wealthy, if you're poor, if you're educated, if you're not, it is hard. Like there is no one solution, right? You have to figure out what works best for you. And it is about navigating, but it's also about building community and having tools and resources and knowing where to go and where you can get possible solutions. So that's what Parent Epiphany is about. And it really came about because I struggled. My husband and I struggled. All the things that we're going to be talking about today, like we have lived it. We're currently living it. And so I'm actually very grateful to have this conversation today and explore these topics. Maybe there will be a part 2 because it is ongoing, right? Like we had a dress rehearsal yesterday. It was amazing. And I'm like, wow, every week we could probably talk about this. Like if we're being completely honest. So I am a mother of 2. I am part of a biracial couple. My husband is white, so my children are biracial. My son is Black, and my daughter right now, she is what you would consider white passing. And so right now I'm thinking about all the conversations that I'm having, right? Like what it means to be a Black boy in America and what it will mean for my daughter to be Black, white passing in white spaces, and how she is going to be able to navigate those situations. Like these are realities that my husband and I have talked about, we have cried about. And honestly, it's not, like people say it's not fair, life isn't fair. And I'm gonna use a curse word right now, but bullshit. Like we need to learn, we need to rise up and like get over these things so that my kids can feel safe in this country. So I'm really hoping that this conversation can bring awareness and like the hurt that Black communities and families are feeling right now. It's not just something that you see in the news. It is a lived reality. So Kumara, thank you again for having us on, for having this conversation. I'm excited to explore these topics, share resources, like find strength in community. So thank you.
I love, and that's exactly right. These are our lived experiences. A lot of times people talk about it like it's in theory or it's theoretical, but these things are happening to us currently right now, and are happening to our children. If anyone is wondering, like, why did I do this topic? Because Kumara ain't got no kids. That's right, I don't have any children, but I feel like I have raised so many. As my sister has noted, I am the godmother of 2 of her children. I'm the godmother of 5 children altogether. I'm also auntie to those 2 kids. And being an educator, I have actually educated thousands of children throughout the K-12 diaspora and mentored quite a few folks who are in college and embarking on their young career. So while I don't have any biological children, I do feel like I'm a mother to so many, because it really does take a village to raise a child. I want to actually harp back to our tech rehearsal yesterday because it was such great conversation. And I'm going to start off with Yasmin. You've had the conversation with your daughter about her being brown. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that conversation went? What did you say? And then anybody else can add after that.
So, a couple of things brought the conversation about. Obviously, the current social unrest, which has been ongoing, but, kind of coming to a head now again, was the first thing. I think I was watching the news more, and over the summer, I was watching the news more, and I think, she saw me crying, let's be honest. And we're all home, so there's no way, to close your door and cry. Your kids are going to see it. They're going to see your hurt. And I had been debating about when to start this conversation with her, but it just seemed like the time presented itself. So we watched the Sesame Street special together. She was kind of engaged, kind of not, because, the puppets weren't the primary focus, or it wasn't as much puppet heavy, right? But we've continued to talk about it, and I've talked to her and said, there are some people that don't like people with brown skin. And I've explained to her, like, that's a problem with them. Like, they have a problem. Like, there's something wrong with the way they think, and they're broken. And it doesn't mean that, there's anything wrong with you. It means that you need to be cautious sometimes, and it's not all people, but, and she said, well, could they hit me or could they hurt me? And I said, well, the ones who tell you flat out to your face they don't like you, they might, right? But other people might not tell you. They just might not be as nice. And she's kind of sat with that, and we've talked about it here and there. She'll come and we'll just bring it up again. And it's an ongoing conversation. But, that's the first time I've really had an open, I had a direct conversation. But let's be clear, like, that conversation starts even before then. Like, Kwamara, you gave me Big Hair, Don't Care. We've read Princess Hair, which is like about a whole bunch of different Black girl hairstyles. Whether it's like The Snowy Day, or whether it's like, Happy to Be Nappy, or I Like Myself, like all of these tools I think are so important for brown parents to start introducing to their kids at a really young age, because that self-love is critical. Like, I wouldn't feel as comfortable telling her that some people aren't going to like her if I didn't know she already runs around being like, oh, I'm cute. Like, and listen, sometimes I'm like, all right, calm down. Like, it's a bit much. But at the end of the day, that's really important, right? Like, she needs to know her skin is beautiful. Like, all the colors of the rainbows are beautiful, but she's going to hear Barbie looks cute, right? She needs to hear the girl with the caramel skin, with the dark chocolate skin, with the cocoa skin, like that she's beautiful. That hair, whether it's, 4C curly or bone straight, that doesn't affect somebody's beauty, and that's not where their worth lies. So I think, like I said, while the direct conversation happened recently, and, she'll come back to me and we'll talk about it again. And I think it'll continue to get more serious as she gets older. I think it's important that I have that conversation, that I started the conversation now, and that I started the self-love early, particularly as she starts to enter a school in a suburb that we live in that's predominantly white. She needs to understand, like, there are going to be additional challenges for you, and to be prepared for that. That's my job as her mom, to prepare her. And I feel like I don't want her to ever come back to me and be like, Mom, why didn't you tell me? So that's where I'm coming from.
Can I jump in there? That's really powerful and amazing, because this is something that I've been struggling with my sons. Obviously, they're still young, right? My son's 3 and the other one's 9. And a couple of things is, I was very conscious of the subconscious lessons that he could learn, right? As a young Black boy looking at media and what, sort of he sees. I mean, I can't think about one preschool show that features a dark-skinned Black boy, right? For example, I think Little Bill was one, but that's not on the air for other reasons right now, all this other stuff, right? But like, there's nothing. We watched Doc McStuffins just started, but he watches Sesame Street, Dora, all of that kind of stuff. And we live also in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. Some of his nannies have also been Hispanic, and it's been important for me to teach him another language, which has been Spanish. And I try to speak Yoruba to him, which is my native language as well. So he speaks Spanish. He's such a smart kid. He picks up everything. But I've been very conscious about having books, right? From when he was a baby, we were doing, Whose Knees Are These? And we have this book that he loved, Full of Love, right? Making sure there are Black families, making sure that we're representing in different ways. And when this moment came, but even with that, I think I had my head in the sand a little bit. I think I was like, I am a Black woman. I am Nigerian. I never had these conversations with my kids. And I'd be curious from you guys if your parents had these conversations with you growing up, because my parents, I mean, I think, one of you talked about sort of, going back and Adila, I think you talked about someone calling you an Oreo and your dad explaining. If I had gone to my parents, they'd be like, I don't know, what are you talking about, right? Like, they wouldn't have known to even give me, have that. So it's like learning to be Black in America was something that I learned. And my parents learned too, as, sort of they were living here, but it was in an adult way, and it was a little bit different. And so I think, I have a nephew, he's 5, and, he's had he's not 5, he's 10 now, but since he was 5, he's been having, sort of racialized incidents. And my sister and her husband, who are both Black, both, immigrants to Daddy and Nigerian, I don't believe had a proactive conversation with him, right? But started having the conversations. And even with that, it didn't occur to me. Yasmin, you say it so easily, right? Like my husband and I have both been struggling with how to do it. And like, I'm going to take that and that's the conversation I'm going to have and I've talked to other people who are like, we don't know how to talk about it. So like what you did there is so amazing. And it's so helpful for me, even because I've been trying to figure out how to do that and without making it complicated. And, my son, I think we went a little bit the other way. We've been dealing with it. I don't think he's noticed as much. We're very big on emotional intelligence as well. And in my head, I think my direction has always been sort of having this responsibility to sort of hold his childhood a little bit longer. And I don't know if you guys have seen this movie, I think it's called Life is Beautiful. And it's a very, very sad movie, but I think about all the time about how this father had, even in these dire straits, right? So it's about a man in a Holocaust concentration camp and how he kept his son from understanding what was happening until sort of he was freed. I don't know if it's a true story, but it always impressed in my mind the power that parents have to shape their children's realities, right? Even in the most dire circumstances. So my approach had been sort of that, right? Really sort of like feeling the range of my emotions. I'm seeing 2 therapists right now, including a couples counselor. We are in it, right? But making sure that I can manage my emotions so that I can be a solid foundation for my children. And he's joyful. He doesn't really sort of, know sort of what's going on. He's excited. Both parents are home all the time. He's like loving it. But I think, so he's not aware of sort of anything happening. But I've been struggling because I know I have to introduce it. And I think I was telling Kumar yesterday, so I have this picture, which is the Last Supper, in my sort of like kitchen, which is basically a Black version of the Last Supper. And it is a bunch of Black, men holding up, and they're all sort of around the table, sort of like just standing and holding up the Black Power salute, right? And then my so I started trying to be like, oh, you're, and we did Beyonce's Brown Skin Girl came out, and we did a brown skin boy version that I sing to him and he knows, and sort of all that kind of stuff, right? So I do Your Skin is Beautiful. I make sure Afia is another book that we bought that's a dark-skinned, Black girl. I'm the queen. Like if it's a Black person in it, I'm buying it, right? I have all of them, right? But he said it, and then he was like, Mama, why are they holding up their hands like that? And I was like, I could feel that. I was like, oh my God, what do I say? How do I say the right thing? What do I say? I was like, because it's a sign to let them know that, everyone knows that their skin is beautiful. Something dumb. I don't know what I said. And he was like, why do they need to let people know their skin is beautiful? And I was like, oh Lord Jesus, I am not ready for this. So I think I wanted to share that. It's not sort of like answers, but it's just, I think in a lot of homes, like it's, I feel like I don't know how to have the conversation, even though I feel like I should have been ready. I should have known it was coming. And I didn't, I still am struggling with sort of how to tell him people might like him. And I was actually going to ask you about, people might not like you, but I was going to ask you about how you would handle microaggressions. But you said, some people might not tell you, they just might not be as nice. It's so simple, right? And so I just wanted to say that's been my experience, but I really appreciate that I've learned something immediately from you, because I'm literally going to use those words and go talk, when I have to talk to him about it and start talking to him about it. So, I've learned something already.
Can I, I was about to jump in. I think as, Black parents, Black and brown parents, in a real sense, we don't have the luxury of shielding our kids from everything. And something that's really instructive from my parents, because they're very much, Afrocentric, Black power, Black pride, all day, every day. Okay. I don't think a day went by when we didn't read something by a Black author. I always make fun of my parents about, Halloween. We either had to dress as somebody from Black history, or a Bible character. Like it wasn't, that's sort of how I grew up. And I think it's important for us to not adopt a white lens and thinking like, oh, talking about race is hard. Children in slavery didn't have that luxury. And yet they still played with dolls. They still rode bikes. They still sang songs. They still told stories. And so it's important to raise your children with not only the knowledge of who they are, but how they need to operate in the world so they can survive, and so that they can always be joyful. Yet, and even through, I mean, the worst thing in the world is when you've raised your kid, you don't want them to go to college and somebody called them a nigger for the first time, and they're like, what is happening? When I was in graduate school, there was a group of us who would sort of mentor a group of Black undergraduates, and they had no idea what was happening to them, because college was the first time that people were like outright with it. And then they're having to sort of evaluate their whole life. Have I been the pet Negro this time? And blah, blah, and so you need to, I think it's important for all of us to hold the joy and to always be joyful, and to lift up not just the, hard times stories, but also the good times stories. And so they know who they are. The other thing I feel like it sounds like you're dealing with is a conundrum of being an identity placed onto you that's not necessarily yours, but because you live in the United States, people are assuming that about your heritage and your kids' heritage, and that's very real too. And that's a different thing altogether. And so I think you have to hold all of it and to be as honest as you can, and to hold all of it with, in all of its complexity. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that it's interesting because Chopé, I know the way you speak about it. My husband and I actually made a very conscious decision, of which yesterday kind of just changed my whole perspective, but a very conscious decision not to have the conversation. And part of that decision was because we felt that this world was going to educate them by nature of them being who they are at some point, right? And let's try to, Chopé, I think you said it, preserve that innocence, or preserve the lack of having to identify one way or the other. And again, for me, it's even not more complicated, but it's complicated because I'm an immigrant, my kids are first generation. So it's, how do I educate them on race, but how do I also educate them on culture? And they're very different to me, and they mean very different things. And both of them are big minorities in this country. And, I struggle with that. And my son, who's 5, is beyond his years. He is older, and he has a very broad mind, and he can understand relatively complex topics. And I remember when Amadou Diallo was shot, my husband and I, neither of whom are runners, mind you, we ran. We ran for the time that everybody, I think it was 2 minutes and 35 seconds, or 2 miles and 35, whatever it was. And my kids have never seen me put sneakers on and run, nor have they seen my husband do that before. So my son asked us, what are you doing? I said, I'm going for a run. And if he looked at me as confused as I would expect him to look at me, why are you going for a run? And I said, I'm honoring somebody's life. And all of a sudden I ended up in this conversation that I was very unprepared for, because he was asking a lot of questions that were very complex questions, of which even at that age, I was unaware he could even process, right? And Yaz, when you just said your first incident was in kindergarten, that really hit me, because I was like, whoa, that's my son's age. And I kind of fluttered, I didn't have a good answer, and I didn't answer his questions well, and I probably said too much on the fact that he was killed, and very little about the race. It was just a mess. And my husband wasn't there, and I was like, oh my God, I wish he was here. I need somebody else. And later he came back, he's like, what did you say to him? I was like, I don't know. I just didn't handle that well. And I think it has, yesterday's conversation, that rehearsal conversation that we had, prepared me that I really need to this needs to be a very conscious thought process. And it's Like I need to prepare myself more than even prepare them of how to find the words that are appropriate for their age, that don't stifle them, but grow them, you know, and expand their mind versus contract their minds. And that's a hill I haven't even started to climb yet, but this conversation is inspiring me to do it because I'm realizing that my prior mentality of don't address it because, hey, they're gonna face it anyway, so just don't address it too early, is probably a faulty perspective, right? It's probably not preparing them in a way that they're going to be able to rise to a challenge when they're faced with it with the right toolkit. And Yaz, like you say, as jobs, I always feel like I want to prepare my kids with the right toolkit in any situation to handle themselves. And I worry about my son, my eldest Noah, because he's very social. You know, like he's very social. He's the kid who would go running towards a cop, not thinking, you know, like he's the one that never maliciously, but because he's so friendly and he's so extroverted, that how will that get perceived and reacted, you know? And it's things that I have to think about now way more consciously than I was expecting to, you know, prior to yesterday's conversation. So a lot.
You know, I just wanted to jump in really quickly because, you know, you guys were saying that we were talking about our first experience of being racialized in like kindergarten, like a young age. But here's the thing, like, I think that kids are conscious of that way before that first experience. You know, I think Celine's first experience, I actually talked to Kumar about because she was like 2 years old, I think. And somebody had given her Barbie. Like one of my girlfriends had given her, it was actually sweet, right? My girlfriend's kids gave my daughter her old Barbie, like, oh, I love Celine, I want to give it to her. And it was a white Barbie. And Celine had some black Barbies that I had given her, or actually multiracial. She had a Middle Eastern one, she had a black one, she had a Latina one, whatever. So she wanted to play with them and she said something like, oh, she wanted the white one. And I was like, she distinguished. And I was like, oh, she noticed? Like, what do I do now? And Kumar was like, oh, well, she said something about the black Barbie, whatever. She said, and I didn't even know that she had acknowledged that there was black and white. That's what it was. And Kumar was like, that's okay. Like, so she knows that they're black. Like, what does that mean? Like, that's a good thing that she knows that there's a difference. Let her know who she is. And so I think, honestly, I got to thank you again, Kumar, like for encouraging me to have that difficult conversation. And one last quick thing that I would say is that, you know, Sope and Adil, I think, and I see it with my husband, like there's racism everywhere in the world, but the American experience, that's something else. And to live that and to have to digest that and to give it and to explain it to your kids without having grown up with it yourself, that's challenging. Like I see my husband being challenged with it. And I was talking to a girlfriend who works at the UN and she was like, you know, I work with a number of people of color who just aren't Americans and they see what's going on here. And they're just like, they're not ready for it. Like it's beyond what it's beyond what you can explain to someone. One, you have to live it. And two, there's so many years of history and incidences behind it. So to truly digest it, it's a completely different challenge. And you know, I understand why that conversation might be particularly daunting.
I was just going to say, you know, I just like to jump in as a mother to biracial children. You know, I'm very much aware of like skin color in our household. And I'll be honest, when I was pregnant, actually with my first child, I had a fear that I would birth a white child and people would think I was the nanny. And to be honest with you, after my son was born, he was light skinned. He's gotten darker over time, but someone did ask me, is that baby yours? So, you know, these are, and I don't think that person meant it maliciously. Like, I don't think that was the intention, but we live in a country where like, it was like normal for that person to ask because we have this white supremacy lens, right? And so she perceived that maybe this child, because our skin color was different, was not mine. And, you know, and so even as like a Black parent, like navigating these things, it can be difficult. And, you know, again, I think about like my daughter and like, well, people think like, oh, your mom's Black, or how does that work? And, you know, those type of conversations, we're not having them now, obviously, in that regard. But I do tell my children on a daily basis, like their skin is beautiful, right? Both of them, like your skin is beautiful. I love the color of your skin. And I think it can be as simple as that, right? Like when we think about our children and we think about race, and I think sometimes we like try to overcomplicate the conversation, where our children are learning, their brains are developing, and just like they learn language, like one word at a time, like they can learn race in the same way. It doesn't have to be like this overly complex thing. It can literally be like, people have different skin color. Leave it at that. If they have questions, great. If they don't, you know, move on. And you know, so I think sometimes like as adults, we place our emotions, our ways of thinking onto our children, and they don't necessarily think in that same way. So, you know, approach it simply, and then if there are follow-up questions, then take it from there. And ultimately, you know your child best. So, you know, you have the conversation the way that you feel comfortable, and if you think it needs to be readdressed, then do that. But, you know, I think when it comes to parenting, there is no right or wrong way. It's what's best for your family and what makes sense for your child. And it could be even individualized within your family, you know? So that's also something to keep in mind. Not every child learns the same way. And so I think we just need to keep that in mind when we have these type of conversations as parents.
I think that's a really good point. And there are a couple of things I want to say, and maybe not controversial per se, but just an interesting perspective. I think it's interesting. I think you're right, Adila. It wasn't that I consciously said I wasn't going to have that conversation. I just thought I was going to wait to have it, right? And I knew that at kindergarten, 5, like I said, my nephew had it happen at 5. So I just thought I had more time, right? Like I thought that it was that, you know, he's not going to school, he's home, so he's not in preschool. And I'm aware, so I actually posted an article. A friend of mine is also a racial, so she's a child psychologist, and she wrote an article targeted more to white parents, how to raise anti-racial kids. But there's the research, right, that as early as 6 months, kids see the difference. So it's not that they're not seeing it, they're seeing it, right? And they start to assign categories, right? If they always see brown, to your point, Sharita, that person asked you, because from 6 months, it's like brown people are the help, right? Like all those faces grouped together, like they start to do that very early because they're cataloging the world. So I think, you know, and I think it's interesting because I'm a bit of a hybrid. I think, you know, Olushola, you said something really interesting in terms of, it was actually very helpful to me because it is something I've been struggling with, this struggle of this identity placed on me that doesn't match with sort of who I am. The distinction for me, though, is not that it's because I don't see myself as Black, because I did grow up here. So even before I met Kumara, I went to elementary school in LA, and we lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So I do feel like I consider myself a Black American, and of course, and similarly, right, like we're not all the same. So like there are Black Americans that are different, right? I'm not saying I think it is a different thing from a lived African American experience, but I still consider myself a Black American. And, you know, it's always important for me to say Black people are not all the same. We have a lot of, you know, we're very different, but you are still Black. And so I think for me, it was one that, you know, there are a million things, and I think we can sort of talk about other things, you know. There are many things I didn't prepare for, but sort of figured out as we went along, and that has been my parenting journey. And I think for me, this moment, right, in terms of, you know, just the George Floyd and the aftermath of that during the, really brought it to the forefront. And I think I remember thinking, you know, oh God, he's still young. He's not, you know, I have a couple of years. And I think that's true. Because again, like I said, he's fairly sort of isolated. I think it was just, I realized that I didn't know how to have the conversation, right? Like, I think it's just, and, you know, that's it. So now here's maybe the controversial part. and I think Adila, I would love your perspective on this. We do not have a white woman who's a parent of Black kids on this panel. Adila, so I'm gonna put you a little bit on the hot spot. You're the closest we have, so maybe that's sort of the situation, right? And I've known most of you for a long time, so I feel like I can, sorry, I don't know everybody who's watching, but for a long time, so I can have that conversation. But I think this is one of the challenges, right? Like Sharita, I think one of the things you were saying, and I understand your point, and I don't think it was counter to what Yasmin was saying, but I actually really agree with Yasmin. I think you have to. I think race is not one of the things that they sort of don't see or there's like leeway with, right? I think it is that this is what the world is going to do. You have to prepare them. I do not agree. And I think, sorry, and I want to be very careful because I agree with everything you say in terms of, sort of, you have to let people raise their kids in different ways, not one size fits all. And I get really annoyed with these sort of mommy wars, right? The stay-at-home mom versus the working mom, the cook all your food, organic food. Like, it's so counterproductive to me. One of the challenges for me, though, has been around white people raising Black children. Because I think, and not that I don't think you should have it, and sort of Olushola, similar to you in college, we had a group, and kudos to a friend of mine from college who ran this group. And this is in the 90s. I'm going to date myself. We all came up together. So, in the 90s, before we started talking about all this, before Madonna even started all her stuff, right? It was a few white people who had, not a few, quite a number actually, interestingly, who had adopted kids primarily from Africa and were raising them in New Hampshire and were raising Black kids. And there was no thought about the conversation. I mean, it was my friend, God bless her heart, has been an educator and a mama for years. And, these kids didn't have lotion. Their skin was literally bleeding and peeling off because they didn't know to put lotion in the harsh New Hampshire winter, right? I mean, their hair was falling out, lice, all that stuff, because it wasn't combed. I mean, and so I was conscious of this even sort of in college as I was figuring that out. And it was very conscious to me that they're going to go to college and have to deal with all the things that you were talking about, not just the physical stuff, which was bad enough, but how to move as a racialized person in America. And I remember, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And there was a conversation that he had with biracial couples. And it was a woman who was Black and married to a white man, and a woman who was white and married to a Black man. And the white woman was like, oh, his family doesn't like me, and I just took it so personally, and I just have to know it's not about me. And literally the response was, well, people who think like that are narrow-minded, and you should just not give them any mind. And I had questions because this was what I was like, well, how are you going to raise your babies? Right? Is his family concerned about the fact that these kids are not going to have someone that understands how to help them be Black in America? And one of the examples I see all the time is these conversations, these mixed kids are having this moment where they're like, my parents are kicking me out of the house. I'm a Black person. My white parent is kicking me out of the house and saying, you need to stop talking about Black Lives Matter. You need to stop acting like this is a problem. This is not who we are. But you have a Black child and you're not honoring their lived experience. So again, I think it's not as simple as sort of like you should or shouldn't do anything. I just think that I do feel, and it's something that I've sort of seen a lot about, if you have a Black child, I do feel strongly that you have a responsibility, like you said, to prepare them and put them out in the world for that, because the world is not going to teach them in a good way. Like, let's just be 100% real about that. It's not going to be a good way that they teach them. So I don't know what that means, but that's just sort of some of my thoughts on that.
I just want to chime in and just say, I just wanted to say, I don't think that there's, I do believe that every Black child should have, right, this education that we're talking about. I was just speaking to, so I just want to be clear that like the type, right, like when you have those conversations, sort of the type, have the introduction, I do think that is up to the parent to decide like how big, how small, what does that initially look like, right? Like Yasmin, for example, she had some incidences, right? And so she felt like she needed to have this larger conversation with her daughter because she was asking questions and there was like a recognition of skin color. We haven't been there. So like, we just haven't had those same conversations, even though like, again, my husband's white, right? Like my husband could pick up on those things, but like, our son could pick up on those things, but hasn't. And so we just haven't had like like this is a white person. And again, it's just like the slow introduction of like, your skin's beautiful, my skin's beautiful, right? And so I'm not saying that those conversations aren't important. I'm just saying the way that you want to introduce your child to them is very individualized, because again, you know how your child is going to respond, and where they developmentally can understand. So I hear you, Chopay. I definitely, I 100% agree with you. Those conversations are critical to our, Black and brown children. And I don't think they should not be happening. So I just wanted to make that very clear.
So, and I wasn't trying to say you were, because I think we've had conversations before where I know that's the case. I think was trying to open the conversation in terms of looking at sort of, I think, and part of it not in pointing fingers, like my experience, like I said, like I don't know how to have the conversation because my family has not done a great job doing it. Doesn't mean I don't believe we should have a conversation, but that's the reality. I think I was trying to point out that there may be some situations where it is even more sort of like, not only do some parents not believe you should have the conversation, right? But in a detrimental way, sort of do not even honor their children's lived realities about what that means. Sorry, I know you were going to say something.
Yeah, and Chopay, to your point, I knew one day the conversation would have to be had. I just was hoping time was on our side to some degree. Probably one of the most pivotal points in the last several years was when Trump got elected, because I remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, there are so many people. There's so many more people like him and willing to admit that they are like him than I was wanting to believe in this country, right? And since then, I feel, because my parents and we actually had this conversation 2 nights ago. They're visiting, and it's not like all of a sudden this country has become racist, right? This has been this world for eons, right? Since probably it was conceived as America. But now people have better phones and social media exists. And there is a feeling of accountability that didn't exist previously, that's bubbling. And because Trump, the person who runs as president, can speak so big, like with so much bigotry, so publicly, it has allowed other people to feel like, well, if he can do it, I can do it, right? So that is, I think, like the intersection of why this is suddenly bubbling in the way that it is bubbling. And for me, Chopay, to answer your question, what I struggle with is, how do I help my children identify when there's so many different things I want them to identify with? Because they are Black, 50% Black, they're 50% brown, if you talk just color, they're American, they're Pakistani, they're Muslim, they're Christian, they're all these different things. There's so many labels that will exist in my kid's life. And I struggle with, how do I prioritize, or how do I, when I introduce myself, I usually say I'm a woman, I'm Pakistani born, like that. So those are the things, like that's kind of how I prioritize. I'm Muslim born. Those are the ways I prioritize my identity. And how will they do that? Because there's so many things now for them that they have to think about that I didn't, right? Because my parents are both Pakistani, they're both Muslim, they're both, right? So it was much simpler for me. I do feel like our kids, all of our kids, and just by nature of this audio, like this panel, there will be many more biracial, bi-ethnic, bicultural kids in our kids' lives than were in ours when we were growing up. And so maybe there's a sliver of hope that there will be more conversations like this happening in our kids' generation than ever happened in ours. And Chopay, to your point, I never had the conversation with my parents, like until we moved to this country when I was 10. Because before 10, I grew up in a community where it was 90% expats, there was like people of every color of every rainbow. And it just wasn't anything I ever addressed, which I'm not saying it didn't exist, because I think it exists all over the world. It just wasn't anything that was ever forefront in my mind. when I moved to this little town called Northborough outside of Boston, I was the darkest thing they had ever seen. I had a British accent when I moved to this country. I was like darker than I am now because I literally grew up outside all day. And my parents didn't understand this culture and the nuances of this culture. I don't even know if they could have had the conversation because they were learning themselves. And I think my brother was 3 years older than me, and he reacted to it very differently than I did, where I wanted to fit in. My accent changed to an American accent almost immediately. I tried to find as many people to be friends with who were looked very different than me. And as I got older, you know, many people who have known me growing up will say, like, Adil has always had a lot of Black friends. Why? Because in my childhood, there weren't as many multiracial children. And the people who were Black in my life were the closest people who had experienced anything similar to what I had experienced. And so I gravitated towards that community because I found a voice much stronger in that community than I did in any others. Newark Academy was predominantly Jewish and white, you know, and so there was maybe like 10 of us and we were all friends, and, you know, and that's kind of how my identity got established. So I'm very conscious of the Black culture here because I've had a lot of education from my friends, but I'm now, as I get older, I'm struggling with, well, what about all these other things that my kids are also? And how do I do that all? Like, because you know what, you're 1% Black, you're Black in this country. Like, it doesn't matter what, you know, my kids are Black. Like, my kids will be seen as Black in this country. And that's a whole change of perspective that I have to have also, because that's not been my upbringing. And I think it's a huge, and my husband, he's of the mentality that I'm going to rise above it all. Right? My husband worked hard. He never though he's experienced it many times, most recently got stopped on a bike by 2 cops 2 blocks from our house, people asking him basically where he was going and what he was doing, and made him sit down on a curb looking up at cops standing at him, right? And this happened, 2 blocks from our home, not even a few months ago. And how do we process that? Because my kids will face that. And how do I process that with also, hey, you're also Muslim, you're also Pakistani. I want you to love and embrace that, but you're always going to be seen this way. And I need to prepare you for that.
Can I hop in? I feel like I need to put a point of clarification. It's not that there are many ways to be Black. And I think what I was trying to say before is that your muscles for talking about race in a particular way isn't exercised the same because you don't have the legacy of Jim Crow, slavery, etc. And so I think that's important when you're thinking about identities. And also, you know, even as, you know, my son is, both of his parents are Black. I think it's important to think about biraciality and multiculturalism differently in the post, Loving versus the state of Virginia, America, versus the legacy of rape, slavery, and a different way of being biracial. And I think the thing that you're navigating is part of the battle that has been won about being able to enter into loving relationships with people of a different race. And so I think that's always complicated.
I just wanted to jump. Oh, sorry.
Yasmin, go ahead. Have the last comment, and then I'll.
No, I just wanted to jump in because Adila, I'm experiencing something similar. Celine will always be looked at as a Black child, especially in this country, but she's Persian, she's Iranian. And, my husband has this Swedish culture that's definitely a part of our life. And, he's taught her Swedish. Like at home, that's all he speaks to her. And now he started speaking Farsi to her so that she can learn that, and she'll talk to grandma in Farsi when they FaceTime. And, maybe it sounds a little naive, but I don't think she has to choose what she is. She is all of those things. And I want her to have that conviction within herself so that if anybody tries to question, well, what are you? You need to put a label, you need to choose. The understanding that in this country, she's going to be, when somebody sees her, they're just going to assume you're African American or Black or whatever they're going to assign her, but that she doesn't have to choose because she is all of those things. She speaks Swedish and loves Midsummer and Lucia's Day, and she likes mac and cheese and Juneteenth, and it celebrates that part of her life. And she's going to speak Farsi and celebrate Nowruz with my husband's side of the family. So it's challenging because you're stuffing a lot of education in a little kid, but I think kind of like what Sharita said, they don't necessarily see it like that. Like that's just who they are. And as they get older, they might start to be like, wow, this is a lot. But I think if we introduce it when they're young, just as like, well, this is just your life. This is who you are, and have pride in that and keep it moving forward. And don't let anybody tear you down. Like I said, my daughter's a little sassy, which is annoying, but I am very happy that she knows she's cute. She knows she's hot stuff. Like, was in class and they were like, oh, what can you teach somebody? Other people were like, oh, I know, I like ducks, I like cats. She was like, I can teach you Swedish. And the teacher was like, yeah, I can teach you Swedish. I was like, okay. But that's important, right? Like that's important for have that level of sense of self-confidence so that she can go forth in the world and say, I am all these things. I don't have to choose. Even if you try to label me, I know who I am.
So, Kumar, I know you want to end, but I just want to put one quick thing. I actually, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think, Sharita, exactly what you said about we don't have to have the whole conversation right away and you introduce it, I think is exactly the point. This was the point you were sort of trying to make about race, but I think is also one about identity. And I think what I was going to say is that, I actually think that is exactly the point. One is having the language to sort of say, that's who you are, and other people that have a problem that you have to have this label, that's on them, right? Not you. People are multifaceted. I think it started, like Yasmin, what you said is making it very simple for me, right? We are what we are, and other people that assign things to them, that's a societal problem that we don't have to internalize. And I think to the other point is, I think this is the point about you don't have to do it all today. I know as parents, I do that too. I have to start teaching them to be emotionally intelligent. It's not just about their culture, right? I have to start teaching them how to read, how to be emotionally intelligent, how to, be successful in life today, right? I think it's sort of giving myself permission as a parent to sort of say, we have by God's grace, a lifetime, right? And it's going to be continued conversations over the span of their lifetime to do that. And finally, I agree. I am so blown away by young people. I was an associate professor at USC for a while, and the freshmen, the way they think about things, just think about how kids think about gender today, right? Like ways that they're going to be teaching us. I think don't be so sort of, I have to show them how. They're going to come to you and be like, Mom, some of my friends who have elementary school kids, they're like, Mom, that was binary thinking. You really need to become, and she's like, okay, so I think it feels heavy. And I think that's what I took away from this conversation. It was just a racial conversation. Where we put our lens on it is like our experience and how it holds us that way. But the kids, they bring a fresh perspective. And I think we just take it one day at a time and don't have to start all the way heavy as they, like Sharita said, as they come into it, then we sort of build up to it. But so I hear a lot of the anxiety that I have as a parent too, in terms of, it's not, but my husband's Rwandan, I'm Nigerian, I'm teaching them different languages, like all this stuff. And I just try to remember to take it one day at a time, and that they'll teach me some of it too. So.
Guys, it's amazing that we literally stayed on one super in-depth topic for an hour, but I think there were so many great gems. Yesterday, we were like, we're going to talk about this and we're going to talk about that. But no, it was so important that we talked about what we talked about today. This is I like how things organically happen. I do want to get to a couple of more things and then we'll close out. But when we're having these conversations, one of the things that all of you all have said is making sure that kids feel confident and that you're infusing them with self-love. Are there resources that you recommend to the parents out there, books, TV shows, programs, people they should follow in order to get some of those resources?
I was just going to say there's a lot. I'm going to post some links in the chat or the comments so people can access them when they rewatch this video, I will do that. I will also have stuff on parentepiphany.com. But I think to Kamar's point, and actually some people mentioned books earlier, which I recommend. I also have. So we can list through those again. Yasmin was like on it, so I'll give that to you. But I just want to say, like, there are a lot of resources, so don't get overwhelmed. Again, like, think about it like one day at a time, right? You don't have to like get everything. You don't have to. Anyway, I just, as a parent, like, I know how it can feel overwhelming, and so I just like, I'm giving you permission, right? Sometimes you need that to say, like, you just need one book, or like, you just need one resource, if that's what you want to do, and you don't have to do it all. So I just want to like point that out, because I think part of what is happening to society today is like, there's so many resources, there's so many places you can go, that it can feel overwhelming and you literally don't know where to start. So we're going to give you resources, we'll give you books, and then just pick one and go from there. So anyway.
I mean, I think Google, that sounds cheesy, but it can be your friend to just find additional books and resources. Like I said, I love buying a book with a brown child in it. From TV, I like Doc McStuffins a lot. I'm thrilled that Celine likes Doc McStuffins. Not only does it feature a brown girl, but her mom's a doctor, and it's an unconventional family. The dad stays home, so it teaches women's strength, and that, masculinity and femininity isn't presented in one way, and to buck those stereotypical roles. Big fan of Doc McStuffins. There's a doll, and I'm sorry, I will look up the name to share with Kumara, that one of my girlfriends, who was me, and I'm sure you can Google it, she has like natural hair, and so you can like style her hair. She's on back order, so that's why we don't have her yet, but you can use like, I mean, obviously I'll get inexpensive ones, but you can use like, Black girl styling hair products on it. You can teach her how to braid with it. And like, I thought that's such a positive doll. So that's something that I'm looking into. And honestly, recently Barbie's really stepped up their game. You can get dolls that look very different and have very different physiques. There's a chubby one that apparently looks like me, but they have, chubby Barbie. They got skinny Barbie. They got tall Barbie. They got short Barbie. They got Middle Eastern Barbie. Celine's got one upstairs with darker skin and a fro. She had Middle Eastern Barbie with a slightly different nose and, longer wavy hair. So I will give props to, I don't know if it's Mattel still, but whoever's making Barbie, you can get ones that look very different, which I appreciate. So some of my resources.
I got this book. I can't know if you can see it. Oh, my camera's like the opposite.
Yeah, you got it. Little Legend.
It says Little Legends, Exceptional Men in Black History. We actually got it as a gift for my son's birthday. And it walks through like a plethora of people in Black history who have accomplished like incredibly notable things. And we try to read a page a day. And I'm sure they have a woman's version of that. I haven't looked it up yet, but that has been really like a really great resource for us too. It's just because it's a little older. It feels like some of the language is a little bit older for my younger kids, but it's so cool.
I was going to say, we read Whose Knees Are These? I think Yasmin mentioned that earlier, and that's a book that we have. And, and it's also helpful. Our children are young. So like, we're talking about body parts and, point out your knees and these are my knees. And, again, it's a good exercise if we're thinking about how do we introduce, if you want, again, skin color and things like that. And, making sure that they know that it's beautiful. And there are people of many different colors and people that look just like them. But I do think it's important to read books. It's important for me to get books that represent people of color in them, and dolls. My daughter, although she currently is white passing, she has blonde hair. She plays with Black dolls. Like, it's very important for me that she has that experience. And that's just something that we have decided to do.
We have lots of books. Shades of Black, A Celebration of Our Children by Sandra Pinkney is a good one. It features photographs of Black children who are white skinned with blonde hair and green eyes, to caramel skin, to licorice color skin, different textures of hair. It's a beautiful book. My son, every time we get to the refrain, "I am Black, I am unique," he like screams it. It's great. And another great book is based on the poem is the poem "Hey Black Child." Illustrations are really beautiful. Again, featuring Black children of different shades in the book. And there's a new book we just got called M is for Melanin. And that's a really, it's an alphabet book. And some of the words are, melanin is kind of a big word, but my 3-year-old says M is for melanin, and we talk about melanin gives us our skin color. And so to really build up that pride is really good. Yeah.
My last one. So I basically went to my Amazon order and looked up children's books, and I have like 15 pages of Black books that I've ordered. So I posted some of them in the YouTube chats, but I really I've also made a concentrated effort to also find books that just show Black families. So Whose Knees Are These? And I bought Whose Toes Are These? Are big ones. To your point about M is for Melanin, we didn't buy that one, but we bought ABC, I Love Me, which is also similar. It's like an alphabet book. Not Norman, my son loves, and it's a Black boy is the main character. It's about his goldfish. It's fantastic. We also have, Who Do I See in the Mirror? I love Saturday and Thank You, Amu. Also are really great. We read all the time. So, I really like he's got the whole world in his hands, because the illustrations are really these beautiful dark skin tones. I'm actually also, I think a lot too, and like Kumar said, I think, listen, we could do this once a month and talk about different things, because I wanted, there are some questions I definitely would love to talk to this panel more about, especially about balancing different parenting styles, especially across race is one thing we didn't really talk about. But even without that, right, just sort of like how you approach that. But I'm also thinking about gender a lot, and like trying to get my son's favorite color is pink, right? And and I'm looking for dolls to get him. So Yasmin, when you get the name of that doll, I have a couple of Black dolls, but I think it's really important for young boys, especially Black boys. We socialize girls to take care of their bodies. With girls, you brush the hair, you cook, you do all that kind of stuff. And then boys, we don't teach them how to take care of themselves, right? And then their poor wives, we get in a situation that we get into, right? And so I'm really conscious. I will say I'm like a feminist, obviously, if y'all couldn't tell. And I was like, I'm so excited to have daughters and raise them and da-da-da. And God laughed at me. He was like, you know what? You're going to have some sons. And that's how you're really going to raise some feminists, right? And so I really am very conscious of teaching them. I want them to clean up after themselves, to cook, to have dolls and take care of them. And so, it's interesting. They sort of, turn out like you. But I was just going to say, Yasmin, I know how you say your daughter is sassy. I was like, I wonder where she gets that from. That's coming.
You know exactly what I was thinking. I was like, Yasmin, girl, we know why Selena sassy.
She get it from grandma.
Guys, these are some excellent resources. Love it. Before we go, and then I do have one more last thing that I do want to ask you all. But before we get there, my mother is texting me, and she wants me to shout out the fact that they bought lots of books about Black folk, that we instilled lots of Black pride in our home. And I think that's obvious. It's pretty clear based off of how I've been raised, how I believe in giving back to the Black community. My sisters do the same. And then she also has 2 recommendations for books: The Patchwork Quilt and The People Could Fly. So please look at that. And of course, we also got lots of different dolls that were, and you can imagine when we were growing up in the 80s, it was not easy to find Black dolls or Black literature. So, they really had to scour through things, and Google did not exist.
Please say those again real quick. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Yes, she got my kid some books that he loves too, about manners, which I was so excited about. So all of those things we tried. Please say the names. Patchwork. I'm writing notes too.
Okay, there.
The People Could Fly. I read that too.
Yeah.
That was incredible. I still have my kid one out here.
I love it. So The People Could Fly and The Patchwork Quilt.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so I always ask this question, even though I am terrible at it. You guys are all working mothers. You are raising Black and brown children. It is COVID. Kids are doing virtual learning. How are you taking care of yourselves? What's your self-care, your routine?
I can start. I struggled with this when COVID first hit because I am a severe asthmatic. So my husband doesn't really let me go out. So I was like mentally struggling myself with, I'm an extrovert. So not being able to be with people and not being able to go out and do the things that I do that keep me sane was a struggle for me. So of course, as a parent, I feel like we do this all the time. You kind of push that aside because you're like, oh, I got to worry about, these little 3 people that rely on me every day. And that got to me after time. And so I was forced not too long ago to start to think about, okay, I have to find something. It's got to be like one thing or something. So now I just wake up 45 minutes early and I work out. And that's kind of my time. And sometimes I hate it and sometimes I love it. But I think also I'm very lucky to have a husband who we are 50-50, like we are both in it and he supports me and I support him. And it's a very balanced parenting relationship. I've always been, and I think sometimes we do this as moms, like kind of this martyrdom a little bit where it's like, I have to do everything and I have to be involved in everything. And I have to, and like, if you're not doing it, you're guilty. And if you are doing it, you're upset. And it's just like this, and my husband's very, very good at compartmentalizing. Like he can, when he's at work, he's at work. And when he's at home, he's at home. And then he can always take time to go to this and he never feels guilty. And I've started to adopt some of that is that if you don't spend the time on yourself, you are not as good a parent, right, as you can be because you're like always stressed. And so I'm getting better at it. I'm definitely not there. But I think at least I can learn from my husband that it doesn't really, you don't have to be there all the time and involved in everything to be a good parent. And I think it was a very big burden that was kind of lifted off me when that light bulb went off.
I still struggle with that. And I learned from my husband the same thing. He's with the kids while I'm working. And I learned from my husband, I don't have to sort of like helicopter, right? Like he's like, my son, I was always so focused on like keeping him engaged. And now my husband's with the 9-month-old and my 3-year-old, like he created a like school routine for himself. Like he gets up in the morning, he does his reading practice, and then he practices his shades and does drawing. And I'm just like, what? And I would have been like, what? And he just figured it out himself. So it was good for me. And I think dads are good at that in general, sort of being like, you don't have to be all alone with them. They'll figure it out. But so that's been sort of my self-care. I think, like I said before, therapy, I think has been really helpful for me. I went for a walk this morning. That was amazing. And so trying to get out more on walks, those really helped me. Just even if I just go around the block, I think that has been really helpful. And just, trying to find how to get rest. I'm a bit of an insomniac and I recognize that when I'm, when you're tired, you're not as good a mom or a good employee or a friend or a supporter for yourself. So those are the 3 things that I really try to keep really front and center, for myself and to make time for, even if the world is going crazy.
I'd have to follow suit with you guys and say I'm not great at self-care, particularly in COVID world. I feel like you would think we're home and we'd have so much more time. And it's the opposite because there's that bleed, right? There's work, life, school, home. I don't know, this strange hybrid world we're living in. But with that being said, we have a old school stationary bike in the basement. So sometimes I'll just go down there and put on like some Netflix show and tune out for a little bit and work out, or like you said, go for a walk. My daughter just started Pee Wee soccer. So that's where they were this morning, which is amazing. And Papa was like, you stay home when we go. And I'm like, yes, I do. Yes, I stay home by myself. And I think it's the self-care now is like, so the bar is low. The bar is low. Like it doesn't take a lot. Like sometimes I'm like, yes, I got to make dinner with nobody talking to me. Like I'll take it. So I think at some time, just taking a moment to be alone is almost enough. I don't know. It's enough at these days.
Yeah, I'll go. I agree. I saw something, it was either on Facebook or anyway, it said, showers aren't self-care. And I'm like, I disagree, because that time in the shower by myself, hell yes, that is self-care. I'm sorry. Like this is post COVID-19 or we're living in it. And self-care, we can define it any way we want. Okay. Like I was angry because there's so many mothers any working mothers, stay-at-home mothers, we don't shower sometimes. Like we will literally go days without showering. So trust me, a shower is self-care. Do not take that away. So I think it can be as simple as that. I think it can be a 5-minute meditation in the morning. I also am not the greatest right now at self-care because I am working full-time. My children are at home. So it is very difficult. Like I keep saying, we're just I have no time away from my kids or my husband. So it is hard. But just taking those moments for yourself, taking a drive. Sometimes we'll take a drive and I'll just have my kids watch a movie in the car and it's just silent. And I can just be in my own thoughts. So I think it can be it's our time to reinvent. I am never one that it has to be a certain way. It works, whatever works for you is right. And so a shower, a car ride, a 5-minute meditation, cooking, those are all things that if they put you in the zone and they relax you, that is self-care. And I will take those moments, especially now, given everything. So I don't think it has to look one way or fit someone's definition of what self-care is, because this is a whole new ball game. Yeah, I do want to take more time though to read. I feel like reading has sort of not been my friend right now. So I want to get back to that. I need to read a good book. And I think that will, that's self-care too. So figure out what works for you and find strength in that.
So I guess I'm on deck. I try to do a lot of things. I don't know if any of it's working. So I am trying to get back into my yoga practice at least, 3 times a week. And when everything's quiet in the house and can light some candles and, stretch and pray. My son and I are always in the car. I think every time Kwamara calls me, I'm in the car, literally in the car. We're FaceTime in the car. Hey girl, we're driving around, whatever. We have a driving playlist and, the weather here is nice. So we put all the windows down and bump some music and go, get a latte, get him a little cookie, and we're on the road, and we just, are very grateful to have that time. If you have somebody that y'all have been social distancing and y'all can have community together, that's something that my family has been doing. My brother and sister-in-law and I have been swapping kids every 2 weekends. Praise Jesus. The Lord, yes. And my son was just there for 2 whole nights, and mommy got to be by herself for 2 whole nights. And I'll do the same for them in, a couple of weeks with their 3. So, I mean, swapping off when you can, so you can actually take time to be with yourself and to, rest, for real rest, is super important. And it's been my practice for the past 2 years to listen, read, watch things that bring me great joy, like Insecure, like Real Housewives of Atlanta, Beyonce's Homecoming. I literally walked out of a job to that soundtrack. So do things that bring you joy, where you're seeing free Black folks, where you're seeing free brown folks. And those are the tools that I use.
The other, I can just one thing, Kamara, is I think something that has been probably brought to the forefront even more so these last couple months is just a little bit more patience with myself and a little bit more forgiveness. Because, before I had my first, which was 5 years ago, I had no iPad before 2 years old, and all need healthy food. I'm going to cook everything, and everything's going to be natural and organic, and da-da. Yesterday, we got our kids McDonald's, and they had iPad this morning when I was getting ready for this session. And I think, and you know, if you would have rewinded me back 5 years, I would have been like, oh, I would never do that. Like that just would never happen. And I think as parents, we do a lot of judging, not even so much of other people, but of ourselves, because we have these, you know, perceptions of what the perfect parent is. And I saw this meme not too long ago of this time, and it was a parent, and they were saying, you know, like, oh my God, COVID, it was so hard. It was impossible. I was working at home. The kids were home. And then it was the kids' perspective. And they said, it was the most amazing time of my life. My parents were always around. I always got to spend time with them. My siblings were there, and we had a lot of quality time. And that truly like hit home for me, because I think they will look back at this time with so much positivity. And I think whether they get iPad for extra time, that's great for them, but whether they eat McDonald's, whether they are, you know, doing whatever it is that you maybe have told yourself in the past was not the best parenting moment, they will look at that because they're getting so much out of this experience, probably more so than all the things we've told ourselves they're not getting. And I think it's just a little bit of forgiveness and patience and realizing that like we're all doing the best we can. And to them, it's like a dream come true.
Thank you for pointing that out, because this is definitely a time of forgiveness and also like changing our expectations. I know just on a, you know, personal level, my daughter is actually still breastfeeding. So she's 18 months. And with my first child, I wanted to stop breastfeeding at a year. And I think we stopped at like 12, you know, we stopped at like 14 months. And it's just been, I don't want to say impossible. I'm sure if I really, really wanted to do it, I could, but we're home all the time and we're hanging out. And so she's like she will let me know when she wants my breast. And I'm like, okay, like, you know, and that's just something that I personally like had to get over. Like, I can't believe my daughter's 18 months, has a mouthful of teeth now, and she is on my breast, you know, and that's just like the reality. And like, I had to forgive myself. It may seem really small, and but that just wasn't my expectation. And so those are like real realities, something as small as that, something as small as screen time, you know, whatever. So thank you, Adila, for pointing that out, because it is a lived reality right now. Forgiveness is huge.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. We talked a lot about having grace. So that's what Dila, Shrita, you guys are talking about. It reminds me just in general, let's all have grace for one another, for the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I cannot thank you all so much for spending like 2 hours with me during this morning time. I think it was amazing. We talked in the beginning about pouring into somebody. I think we have just poured into all of the hundreds, thousands, whoever else is out there is going to watch us. We have poured into them. And what I loved is that you guys poured into each other, right? We've already created community. We've already learned and grown and shared knowledge. We're going to have one last word from our sponsor, and then we're going to go. In our follow-up email, I will link everybody's social media if you would like to get in contact with these lovely, amazing women. You want to chit-chat with them, talk to them about motherhood, whatever. They have knowledge, wealth of knowledge across the board. So let's hear from our sponsor one more time, and then we're going to sign off. Thank you guys so much. Really
I just think I think Black parentpreneurs matter, and the reason we exist is to, like I said, make them the best parent entrepreneur they can be, but also we want them to raise delightful Black children and send those children out into the world, and that will be our gift to humanity.
Great. James, thank you so much. James and the Parentpreneur Foundation, thank you all so much for sponsoring I'm a Black Woman, Yes, I Matter, Parenting Black and Brown Children, both the US and Global Edition. Thank you so much.